All men are potentially good men, but they're perhaps not expressing themselves or showing up as good men.
Men are taught to be strong, tough, unshakable. But what happens when that strength becomes self-destruction, addiction, isolation, silence?
That's so hard to go a year without a drink, a month without smoking weed, or a day or a night without a whiskey after work or whatever. It's very easy to grab a bottle or some porn or a video game and to just sleep it off and push it down.
Too many men are drowning, afraid to ask for help, afraid to admit they're struggling.
If I went missing, 400 strangers will devote hours of their day to search for me. I'm that important. We have no idea how important we are.
Today's guest hit rock bottom, but he didn't stay there. Now he's revealing the hidden battles men fight every day and how to break free.
So I've learned to separate myself from thoughts, which I think is huge. And I wish somebody would have told me at 12 years old that this is even a thing.
This is the conversation no one is having, but every man needs to hear.
Have you ever wondered what masculinity even is in the modern era? Are you ready to move beyond the macho bully or the soy boy archetypes? I'm Marc Azoulay, and this is the Men's Therapy Podcast. Together, we'll explore how neuroscience, Jungian psychology, and Buddhist philosophy can transform your life, your marriage, and your business. Are you ready to deep dive into the minds of men? Let's begin. Hello, welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Marc Azoulay, and I'm here with Dr. Jeremy Goldberg. He's the founder of Long Distance Love Bombs. He's a writer, a speaker, and a coach, and he talks a lot about compassion and really how to spread love, spread kindness, and really trying to change, I think, what we're seeing out there in the world right now. Some of that, hatred and gossip and negativity. So, Jeremy, I'm really happy to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks, brother. I'm stoked to be here.
So I always like to start with the personal story. Like, what got you into this work?
Wow. I would say I entered this personal development space reluctantly and in desperation, let's say. You live life, or I've lived life, had some dark times, got cheated on, mom was in rehab, was dealing with alcoholism, got cheated on again, was drinking too much, was smoking too much, had those sort of come to Jesus moments, as they're referred to, where it's like, maybe there's another way to do things, or, I seem to be the common denominator in all of these reoccurring problems. Maybe I can explore that, right? And so I think a lot of men typically, to paint with a broad brush, try to change their lives or go to therapy or seek help once they've dragged their face on rock bottom for a while. And I used to joke that I was spending so much time at rock bottom that I decided to rent an apartment there so I'd be comfortable and renovate and, decorate the curtains a bit. I just started reading, I started listening, I started questioning, I started being humbled essentially by life, and that humility opened me up to curiosity.
Yeah, let me dive into that, right? Because I think what you just said is huge, the idea of humility. And I agree. A lot of the guys that come to, work with me, they're usually at a rock bottom of some sort, whether it's a drug addiction or maybe it's a divorce or it's, losing a loved one suddenly. But I think men, we're not very proactive about our mental health. It usually takes like that big smack on the face. But humility, right? Humility is the thing to ask for help. So I'm curious, how bad did it have to get, or how did you, be open to asking for help? Because I know a lot of guys don't reach that humble spot. We're conditioned to be told we have to fix everything by ourselves, and if we accept help, we're weak.
It changes. Yeah, 100%. And this idea, I think, is pervasive in our culture. It's in our family systems. It's in our stories. I'm sure you've had lots of good guests talking about this. And for me, it sort of began individually, selfishly, by reading books, by discovering therapists on Instagram, by listening to podcasts. And that sort of set off level one of the quest, so to speak, where I sort of found my footing, got my foot in the door, etc. And then the level two to infinity is recognizing that the levels just continue to show themselves in new and pernicious ways. Like when you advance through a video game and like the bosses at the end just get bigger and a little scarier and a little harder. So for me, it began just with that sort of, it changes, looking up at the sky, cursing my own name, deciding I'll never drink again, right? And then at some point, it was like, oh, I need to talk about this stuff with other people. And then, started reading and learning about vulnerability and bravery and how pervasive all this stuff is and how it actually unites us rather than divides us. And then, yeah, joined some men's groups and started hosting retreats, started attending events. And it just sort of steamrolled. Not steamrolled. What's the other rolling? Snowballed. Yeah, there you go.
The other
Sorry. Before we dive in, I should have a giant asterisk. I have a 4-month-old baby, our first, at home. So my bags under my eyes and my lack of sleep might integrate themselves into this dialogue.
For sure. Yeah. Me and my wife are currently in the process of trying to have a kid, so I'll be close behind you.
Yeah, good, man. Congrats.
Yeah. So tell me about those layers, right? Because I think that's so true. And I'm also in recovery. I've been sober for about 15 years at this point. And for me, it was like, okay, got to quit drinking, quit smoking weed. And then it was like, oh, wait, it's actually because of my childhood bullying. Oh, wait, actually because of my parents. Oh, wait, that's because of my gender norms and masculinity. Oh, wait, because of my lack of connection to spirit, right? Like it just kept like going and going and going and escalating. So yeah, I'm curious if you have a progression or if you can share a little bit of the layers as you experience them.
Changes. Yeah, I just remember, participating or watching people observe things like, was it like dry January or October or whatever they call those things, where you have a month without the thing. And I remember distinctly sitting in a cafe talking to a friend of mine, and she was telling me that she was going to take a year off of alcohol. And my brain immediately was like, why? That's dumb. I could never do that. Right. And so then again, with that curiosity, it was like, wait, why do I think that that's so hard to go a year without a drink? Like, why is that so hard to go a month without smoking weed, or a day or a night without a whiskey after work or whatever? Right. And so I started just questioning my own habits. And then those answers are quite humbling if you sit with what's coming up for you and you're honest with yourself. It's like, oh, I am escaping my reality. Like, I don't like being here all the time. Like, I don't like feeling the way that I feel sometimes. I don't like the thoughts that I think sometimes. I don't trust myself. I'm not proud of myself. I don't like the trajectory of my life right now. I'm scared about the future, right? And so any one of those very simple statements that I just listed are big and significant and deserving of an entire conversation, right? And I found that I had this like jumbled mess of darkness that I was living in, right? And so then I started learning about the shadow and your shadow self and trauma and all the rest of it. And I just started sort of exploring that. And then I just gave myself like a challenge of, hey, I'm not going to drink for it changes. I'm not going to drink for a month, and started getting really clear and really honest with myself, and kind of just drew a line in the sand at some stage and was like, I want to take my power back. I don't like the fact that these substances have control over me and that I feel small and weak in the face of them. And I was like, what would I look like if I felt more powerful? How would my life be? It changed. And then again, being curious was like, I don't know, but I want to know, right? It's the same reason I like climbing mountains and having adventures and experiences and traveling. Like, what's it like to go to Thailand and eat some noodles? I don't know, but I want to know. And so I sort of took this way that I viewed the world and started shining a light on all of that darkness, gingerly and compassionately and slowly. And then things just started shifting.
Yeah, you're talking about a lot of good stuff there, and I want to, I could dig into all of it, but I want to dig into that statement of you didn't like being sober, right? You didn't like your reality. And that was true for me too. That took me years of therapy to be able to admit that was the thing. I mean, for me, I was, poly drug abuser, which is like, you just do whatever, right? Like whatever's available, I did it. And it was, for me, kind of like a slow suicide in some ways. It was a like erasing reality. It was dissociating. It wasn't really about a particular drug, even though, I was high all the time and drunk most weekends and not. But it was like not wanting to be present and not wanting to have those thoughts, not wanting to feel my body, not wanting to take a look at my life. Can you say more about that? Because I think those veils are really common for a lot of people.
Yeah, for me, just as I'm thinking that through, what you shared there didn't land. For me, I think it was more like it changes, like emboldened apathy. Like I just didn't give a shit. And, deep down, that was a masquerade. That was a story I was telling my little sensitive heart that needed love and understanding. But it like was fun to not care. And it was fun to cause trouble and, throw empty beer bottles at beautiful houses and like steal stuff and, get into mischief. And, if I was in college nowadays, certainly would have been arrested. Thank goodness we didn't have phones in our pockets and social media to boast about. But it also was like, it was, how do I say this? Like I used to just drink for anything. It was like, oh, we're going to the game. Like, let's have a couple beers before. Like, oh, we're going to go to the concert. Let's have a couple beers before. Oh, we're going on a date. We better have a couple beers to loosen up. Oh, the date's over. We better have a couple beers or a shot to wind down. And then it was like, wait, like what is going on? And it just felt more fun to not care. Right. And I get that as a grown man who's more mature and significantly more responsible now. Responsibility is hard. And it's hard to live in integrity versus just not giving a shit about anybody and anything. Like it takes more effort. It takes more attention. It takes more heart. It takes more thought. So like part of it, I think, was this immature young version of me that was just running the show, that had grabbed the microphone, had stolen center stage and was just running amok until the other parts of me sort of came more online, saw what was happening, looked at the future, didn't like what they saw and sort of took the power back. That makes sense?
It does. Yeah. It sounds like it was like kind of like a hedonistic or pleasure seeking thing in the beginning of like, have fun, blow shit up.
Literally, like literally we made bombs. Like we literally, I mean, whoever's listening, the FBI, I hope is not, but yeah, we made explosions and we just had fireworks and we nearly got evicted and all the fun things. And the other part of that was like I was going to college in Santa Barbara, California, which is, which was at least party town, beachside, thousands of people every weekend just running amok. And so I was immersed in this fishbowl of debauchery and fun and mischief. And that felt like a version of aliveness. Like that felt like an adventure, right? That felt exciting. And so now my version of that is like peace and silence and fulfillment and connection and love. Those are my version of exciting, adventurous aliveness now. And so I think for me, at the time that I was doing all of that stuff, I just didn't have any sort of recognition that there were alternatives out there because I was so immersed in it. Like all my friends lived the same way, watched the same stuff, made the same choices. And so that was also pre, internet social media time when you could discover any variety of options. So I was just like living it. And then suddenly it changed the recognition that there are alternatives. Just that was a big thing for me. Like, oh, I can do things differently. What are they doing? Why are they doing that? Why am I doing this? Right. And so I think therapy is important for that, to just get an alternative perspective that kind of pokes holes in your landscape.
Yeah. Is there like a story that exemplifies that? Like maybe meeting somebody or traveling somewhere, really having those assumptions challenged?
Yeah. I mean, one for me personally was my mom's battle with alcoholism came to a forefront where she very nearly died. I participated in conversations at the hospital with her doctor where it was literally stated, if you don't stop drinking, you will die. And she used to vomit blood and was unwell. So that was very confronting. And the second part of that was the response that I had was also very confronting, in that I just drank more, drank harder to avoid what I was feeling and seeing. I was feeling overwhelmed. I was scared. I was sad, but I didn't have any kind of vocabulary to identify that. I didn't have close friends that I felt comfortable sharing with. If I did have those friends, I wasn't a person that communicated that stuff. I just bottled it down, drank it up. And so at some point I had to take a long, hard look at my own life and recognize, like, hey, this is literally your mom. And you're literally on the path to be in the hospital where the doctor's talking to you instead of her, that if you don't stop this, you're going to die. So that was a powerful thing. And I think, just to sum that up, my mom is now, I think, 13 years sober. Like, I've lost track of the number of years of sobriety that my mom has. At the time, I would have bet $0 that she would stay sober for a month. Like, it seemed impossible to me. And so to see a person, it gives me goosebumps, man. Like, to see a person that I loved go from being my self-assessed, hopeless, impossible, she's going to die, to then stay sober and change. So I was living overseas in Australia, and when she went into rehab, and I didn't see her for like 6 months. I came home for Christmas, and I remember being at the airport in Los Angeles, and I come up out of the, baggage area or whatever, and there's the crowd that's waiting for you outside. And I see my mom, and she is radiant, like beautiful, alive, present, expressive. And she looks like a completely different woman. She'd gained some weight. She looked healthy. And it was this moment that's burned into my brain of like, holy shit, like, that's possible. And so for me to be able to witness it firsthand, experientially, and to see the changes was like, oh, like, this is doable. Like, I would have bet $0. Like, I was rehearsing what I would say at her funeral. Like, what do I want to say about my mom when she dies? And then to have it take a complete 180 U-turn, really showed me that anything is possible. And then I got curious again. I was like, well, she can do that. Like, what could I do? Who might I be? What's my version of radiant and alive and expressive, 6 months down the road? And so it was just hugely inspirational to me, and still is.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. I love hearing that story, that like your mom inspired you so much, and that she's alive and well and making these changes, and that, her recovery like trickled over into you. Like, that's a big mom win. That's a big parent win right there.
Yeah, years ago I had her on my podcast, and I was at home, so I took my microphone down, and I was getting everything set up, and I was checking the microphone and the levels, and I was like, okay, Mom, like, just say something. And it was quiet. It's like, hey, just say something. Quiet still. And I like looked up on the table, and she was just sitting there, like, huge tears in her eyes. Like, Mom, like, what are you doing? Like, we haven't even started yet. And she just said, I'm just so emotional right now. Like, this is so, it's making me emotional remembering her emotion, right? To just see her be like, this is so special to me right now, what I've been able to do and create, the fact that we can have this conversation, the fact that I'm not dead, the fact that I'm still here, right? And so now I have this 4-month-old baby. Like, my mom is a part of her life. My mom gets to see her granddaughter, right? And such a huge part of my fear and sadness was that all those years when she was sick was, oh, you're not going to see my wedding. You're not going to meet my kids. Like, you're going to be gone. And that just, was so sad to me. And so the other side of that is like, wow, this is the best. This is the literal best thing. Just you being here is so much more than enough. And I think not enough of us appreciate that our existence is that powerful and that special and that meaningful. I have this other story I tell about, there's a kid that went missing in our neighborhood up the street from where I live, a mile away. Teenage boy went missing. It was like locally, I live in a small town. There's not that many people. And so people started searching for this boy. They looked underneath the cars and in the surrounding woods, and they were sharing photos. Have you seen this kid, etc. And he went missing. And then one day the community organized a search and rescue. And on the soccer field nearby, like 400 people rocked up and were divided into teams from the search and rescue people. And like 400 people scoured looking for this boy everywhere. And I remember walking around going for walks, looking for this kid who I've never met, who I don't know, but I knew that he was missing, right? And it felt like part of me was missing too. And so anyway, long story short, he had jumped off a bridge, killed himself. They found his body. And it fucked me up, Mark, because I just pictured this kid who was feeling sad and lonely and despondent, and perhaps didn't realize that, hey, if I went missing, 400 strangers will devote hours of their day to search for me. Like, I'm that important. Like, I matter that much. And I think for a lot of us, we have no idea how important we are. And I think that messes us up, like in a very meaningful way.
If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us to reach more men and inspire them to become the best versions of themselves. Thank you for your support. And now back to the show.
I think you're speaking in that story to like the loneliness epidemic that is affecting tons of men out there, where we feel invisible, we feel like we don't matter. I think a lot of guys are living in echo chambers, media, there's social media and online. But it's cool, right? That like you got a taste of that community. The community that I have to imagine through most of history was like unbelievably obvious, but now it takes something, unfortunately, like a suicide, right, to like remind us that we do give a shit, that kindness is out there and compassion is out there.
Yeah, and it made me question my own beliefs about myself, right? So, I have a platform. I have thousands, tens of thousands of followers, and still I have these dark moments alone sometimes where the voices get loud. It's like, oh, you don't matter. No one will miss you. And it's like, oh, that's still in me. That's still in there. That doesn't go away. And I've just changed my relationship to those voices. And as you say, it's very easy to isolate. It's very easy to turn away rather than towards. It's very easy to grab a bottle or some porn or a video game and to just sleep it off and push it down until one day. I was talking about grief the other day, and I described it as this little gremlin that lives in the corner that you can ignore, but it just gets a little bit bigger every day and a little bit louder every day until at some point you can't ignore that creature. And that's kind of how I feel about loneliness and the darkness and all the other things as well. Is, for a long time, I got really good at ignoring those things and bypassing them and staying busy and fooling myself. I was very smart, and so I was very capable at lying to myself, right? I think cleverness is my partner says sometimes a strength turned up too high is a weakness. So you could be very clever and very sharp. I'm sure you've seen in yourself or your clients. But if that gets too high, turned up too high, it becomes a significant impediment to healthy living and vibrancy.
Yeah, you get a lying to yourself, right? And deluding yourself and manipulating yourself as well. I want to loop back around. You mentioned the shadow earlier, and now I think you're talking about this darkness or this Buddhism would call like delusion, right? Disassociation. Sounds like you do a lot of work with that. I do work with that on my retreats and in my therapy. But I'm curious for you, like, if you could define for our listeners, what is your definition of the shadow, and how do you help people work with that? Because I do think it's like we need more people talking about that. It's not all love and light. There's these kind of dark trauma, lonely parts of us that need a lot of attention.
Yes, it's a good question. So one of the things I've been realizing more over the last couple of years is that we are essentially just telling stories to ourselves all day long, and that we can get better at telling those stories because we're also writing those stories and we can edit those stories. And so this idea of writing healing, this idea of rewriting your life in real time, this idea of recognizing, oh, you want to heal, that means you get to rewrite the story of your past. You want to reduce your anxiety, cool. That means you get to retell this story about your future, and recognize that the identity that I believe that I have is a story. My personality is a story. My relationship is a story. My habits, rituals, all of it. It's just like this story that I'm telling myself. And so I can also become a different character in that story as well, right? So I could just change. Like that's a thing that happens. And so to your question, I see the shadow as sort of this dark place where we don't want to admit to other people that it's there. We want to hide it. This is sort of the typical sort of definition of like, I don't like this part of me, so I'm going to keep it close to my chest and not show you and not share it. And I'm going to forget that it's there. Metaphorically or as an analogy, I picture if you're a house, then the shadow is like the attic, right? Or the what's the thing at the very top? I've never had one. An attic, right? The basement's at the bottom, or the basement, whatever. Some place in your home, you're like, you walk away, right? And it's like this. That's the stuff up there, and it's not the junk drawer in the kitchen. So people are like, "Oh, I do shadow work." Like that's the junk drawer, man. That's not the attic. Like you're dabbling, which is great. Like clean up your house, organize the junk drawer, take out the recycling, like sweep the floors, polish the baseboards. That's good. That's really important. And there's that thing that you go up and you like pull the chain down, and then the like scary ladder comes down and you're like, oh damn, what's up there? I don't know. We bought the house 10 years ago and never been in there. Right? And you like peek your head in and you're like, this is freaking me out. It's dusty, it's dark, it's like, where did that come from, right? So I see shadow work as kind of like that, is, hey, you might not spend much time in that part of the house. You might not show people when they come over, like, oh, hey, there's this cool, scary ladder that comes up and there's an attic up there. But like, it's there, right? And so I view shadow work, therapy, healing, etc., is like grabbing the flashlight, pulling down that thing, climbing the stairs, poking around, grabbing a box, taking it down into the bright light of the kitchen, being like, with a friend or a trusted loved one, like, we're going to look in this box and it's going to be okay. If no matter what we find, we got the Ghostbusters on speed dial. We got 911. Like I got a machete in my hand. Like I got your back. Let's see what's in this box. Kind of off the rails definition, I suppose, but that's how I view it. And I find just as a visual person, it's helpful to have that image in my brain, or else I think it's too easy to like psychologize everything with terms and definitions. It's like, oh, I need to clean my attic up. Like, got it.
Yeah, I find a lot that shadow is often like mediated by shame. Stuff that people are very ashamed about, or these regrets, or like those thoughts you have at like 2 a.m. and you're like, oh, fuck, that one thing when I was in sixth grade, like it's that stuff that we really turn a blind eye to. And I agree with you, right? Like it is there, and it does impact our relationships. It impacts, our ability to love, our ability to connect and to receive. And it's massive. And I notice in my work, I'm curious if you experience the same thing as like, if I'm able to pinpoint a shadow thing and like, reflect it back to the client or whatever, right? Like I'll see their eyes kind of like glitch out. Like there's a moment where they're like, oh shit, right? Like it hits something, and they're like, oh man, like there is some resonance there. Because I think for all of us, we can't see our own shadow. I think that's what makes it, I know you do a lot of retreats and groups and workshops and things. And for me, it's like you have to do it in community, because by definition, you can't see it. That's what makes it kind of creepy in a way,
Yeah, you'll see it like a jab in a boxing match. Like, I don't know, whenever I'm working with someone, I'll just throw out a bunch of little questions or ideas and be like, oh, that one landed. Like, I saw your eyebrow twitch a little bit. Like, what's going on there? But so as an example, the other day, maybe a month ago, right? So we had this new baby, and my partner and I have been going through it. We're in it. And there's emotions and hormones, and it disrupts everything, and everything is harder. And like, yeah, anyway. So she's talking and she's sharing this very tender moment where she's been in some darkness, right? And we're talking about her. It's because they give you all these pamphlets, right? It's like, don't shake the baby. And you get these pamphlets and you're like, what? Like, I would never shake the baby. And then like 3 weeks later and you haven't slept or eaten in 3 weeks and it's the middle of the night and you're like, oh, I remember that pamphlet now. And this is why they gave us that pamphlet. So anyway, we're talking about her having these thoughts of, I don't want to shake the baby. I don't want to hurt the baby. And like, I feel scared. I'll go for a walk and picture myself falling down the hill and throwing the baby into the street because I've tripped. And then a car runs over the baby. And she was sharing this very tenderly, right? And so I said to her, oh, I have those thoughts too. Like just this morning, I was standing on our balcony and I thought, oh, if I take a step back, then I'll trip over my feet and I'll hit my head on the wall and then I'll fall forward and I'll throw the baby over the balcony and I'll see the baby fall past the trees and like splat on the sidewalk. And this, I understand this is getting like very dark imagery, but the point is, these are real thoughts. And so the point is when she shared this really tender, vulnerable thing that, she perhaps had a little bit of shame about that I would say is perhaps living in the attic of her body. And then I met her. I was like, oh, yeah, here's something from my attic. Like, here's something that I'm feeling a little dark and stormy about. And when I shared that with her, there was a moment where I could see in her face this sort of relief of like, oh, like you think that too? Or like this happens to you also? And what occurred was this really beautiful moment of connection where we ended up laughing about how messed up it was. Like, yeah, isn't it so annoying that we have these like wild visuals of potential despair and destruction of our most treasured little object? And so we bonded and we connected and we kind of helped each other organize that attic, that little shadow space a little bit there. And then later we read about it and it was like, oh, this is a biological thing by design that evolution has forced you to consider all of these dangers so that you keep your kid alive. And right now, guess what? It's just a strength that's turned up too high. So it's a little bit of a weakness. It's like, oh, everybody goes through this. This is normal. We're not doing it wrong. We're doing it right. And that little reframe was everything. And so I think for a lot of people, for myself, for people I work with, the expression of that shame is often met with surprise of, oh, you also do that? Like, I'm not a freak. I'm not this like person that deserves to not belong and get kicked out of the club and live out in the woods alone. And I'm a bad person. It's like, oh, there's such connection in all that stuff. We don't talk about it enough.
We don't talk about it enough. Yeah. And that's why we need to do more groups and just like be more honest and vulnerable. Like you're saying before, right? It's like, yeah, we said like, I'm not a freak or I'm not a monster. And I find that, yeah, a lot of guys come to therapy, and I'm sure you see it too, like thinking that they're a monster or that they're a villain or that they're broken or that they're a sociopath. I have so many guys, within session, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, usually after they get to know me, like that's the big reveal of like, I think I might be a sociopath, or I think I might really hate my wife, or I might really hate my kid, or I'm a, monster. And it breaks my heart every single time. I've done it, I don't know, hundreds of times at this point, but like it breaks my heart every single time about how disconnected these guys can be from just like normal human experiences, right? Like, yeah. Do you see that in the work that you do with your people?
Yeah, I see it in myself as well. I'm remembering there's some quote that says something like, the monster I created to protect my inner child is hard to manage. You know what I'm talking about?
No, but I like it.
It's I forget who. I think it's like Mark Moran or somebody. So this idea of I created this monster to protect myself, and it's really hard to manage that monster. Um, and I picture that movie Inside Out. It's that Pixar movie where there's all the emotions living in your head, right? There's anger and sadness and whatever. Or another version of that might be a boardroom, right, where there's 10 board members, and it might be the primal violent guy and the compassionate loving guy. And I view like all of these parts as existing in my head, and sometimes the primal sociopathic guy that I have access to grabs the microphone and dominates the conversation and is really loud. And it's this idea that just because a dog can bark loud doesn't mean it's a good dog, right? So like just because the voice is really loud doesn't mean it's a good voice or a good idea or a effective contributor to the discussion of this boardroom. And so I think I've made peace with more and more through meditation and all of the maturation work and etc. Made more and more peace with the idea that I'm not my thoughts, right? It's very simplistic. It's a basic idea of meditation, but I'm not my thoughts. I'm not even the guy that thinks about the thoughts. I'm something behind it, right? So I'm not the movie on the screen. I'm not even the light projecting the movie. I'm like not even the guy loading the movie in the projector to put on the screen. I'm the light, right? And I'm all of it at the same time. And so sometimes I'll hear a voice in my head, or I'll hear it from a client, right? And it's this very tender sort of expression, like me, like, man, like for example, if you've ever been to the airport and you're waiting at the gate or you're on a plane and you hear this toddler just screaming, it's like, I'm just trying to read my book. I'm just trying to enjoy my life. And this toddler just won't stop screaming. And there'll be a voice in my brain that is like, I want to grab that toddler and throw him out the emergency exit of the airplane. Like, I want to drop kick the toddler at the gate. And it's like, well, don't do that. Can't do that. But I've learned to sort of laugh at that now. But I can see how easily it would be to tell a story about, oh my gosh, I want to murder a child. I'm a sociopath. Oh my gosh, why would I ever think that? I'm a bad person. And then you're, in the front row of the like spiral circle ride down to nowhere good. Right?
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I mean that's it, right? I mean, we talk about nice guy a lot on this show, and I think that's it. That's nice guy typology, is that you start like pathologizing your thoughts and trying to be like, I need to be nice, I need to be good all the way down all the time. And the fact I think about drop kicking that baby, or I'm driving in traffic and I'm like, oh, what if I just like went left a little bit, and got knocked out, right? Like those, I think people really grab onto, that it means something about themselves. Versus, I think what you're saying, it's like, one, at best, it's like random ass firing. Maybe there's some evolutionary reason to it, but I think it's also just like neurochemistry doing its thing, and it's going to generate thoughts. But I think most people get attached to that. So I want to just hearken to our listeners of like, hey, meditation's huge. It's big for me too. But being able to separate yourself and know that you are like the vessel of all your thoughts and experiences. You're not them themselves,
Yeah, there's a big difference between thinking the thought and actioning the thought, right? So I can have the thought, like, oh, I want to throw that kid off a window or whatever. I do this too. I don't know if you do this, but anytime I'm like on a balcony somewhere very high up, say I'm on like the 30th floor of a hotel, and I look out the window or I'm on the balcony, my brain, for whatever reason, says, we could jump right now. It's like, hey, what? Yeah, we could, but like, why are you thinking that? What's every time, every rooftop I've ever been on, I'm like, I could jump off this. Like, man, that'd be a long fall. How far do you think it would take you to fall? Like, how many seconds before you hit the pavement? You think you'd survive this? And like, brain, chill out for a second. But there was a time when I was younger, I remember being on vacation in the mountains with my family, and I was maybe 12, and I was laying in bed and I was about to fall asleep, and I was happy. There's nothing wrong in my life. And my brain decides to go, hey, you know what? If you wanted you could go into the kitchen right now and grab a knife and stab yourself in the heart. And I laid there in terror. Mark, just like, what? Am I suicidal? Do I want to kill myself? Like, what's going on? Whereas now, if I have that thought, it's like, brain, shut up, man. I'm trying to sleep. I'm like, knock it off. Right? So I've learned to separate myself from the thoughts, which I think is huge. And I wish somebody would have told me at 12 years old that this is even a thing, right?
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you wanted to open up, but you were afraid that it wouldn't be taken well? You ask yourself, what's the point? Nothing's going to change anyway. So you do what you always do. You push it down, numb out the pain with a drink, a night out, or pornography. I've been there myself, and I know that men lack the outlets for emotional expression, which is why I founded Men's Therapy Online, a healing hub for men's mental health. If you've been knocked on your ass or just crave meaningful connection, join Men's Therapy Online, a community of men who just get it. We offer individual therapy, men's groups, and powerful retreats, all led by licensed therapists. At Men's Therapy Online, we will help you to get back on your feet and take your life to the next level. Start your journey today at menstherapy.online.
Yeah, it's huge. And, when the Buddhist people I follow, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, talks about like a sense of humor and playfulness. And you just illustrate that, right? Just being like, brain, come on, man. Like, chill out. Like, are you hungry? Like what's going on with you? Like it can have this level of lightness. I want to pivot a little bit into talking about compassion, because I know kindness and compassion are two things that you're quite vocal about online. And yeah, I guess a little side story, right? Like back to Buddhism, the Buddhist symbol for compassion, you're probably familiar with this, is like a sword. Right, which I've always loved. It's the idea that like it cuts through the bullshit and it hits exactly where it needs to hit, right? It's like a scalpel, and Buddhism also has this thing that translates to idiot compassion, right? Which I think in the West we would call like enabling, right? Which is like, oh my God, that's so sorry, whatever you need, I'm here. And back to nice guys, I think a lot of nice guys, we're really good at idiot compassion and we struggle with that sword of compassion. So I'm curious, how you frame it and any advice you might have on how to be direct yet compassionate, because I see a lot of guys struggling with that. They don't want to let the Hulk out, but they also need to say something sometimes,
Yeah, I do. And one thing that was helpful for me was when I realized that, because I remember hearing, is it Robert Glover, No More Mr. Nice Guy? I remember hearing him on Connor Beaton's Man Talks podcast years ago and walking around and being like, oh my God, this is me. Like I've lived this life. And so one thing that was helpful for me was when I recognized that when I was behaving in that way of trying to be the nice guy, always be helpful, to be compassionate, don't get mad, don't be mean, that I was also not being compassionate to myself. So I was trading disappointment in them for disappointment in me, meaning I would let myself down rather than letting them down. And it was this very subconscious, subtle trade-off that I didn't even realize was happening. And what I learned, like as I explored that, was there was this feeling of resentment in me. There was this feeling of like angst. I call it the wah-wahs, when it's just like, wah-wah, where it's like, what's going on right now? I just feel, my partner calls it smashy. I remember I feel smashy. I feel fiery. I'm not happy. But on the surface, the story that I'm seeing is a friend needed something. I didn't really want to do it, but I did it anyway because I remember I'm generous and I'm a good friend and I'm a nice guy and that's what I should do. It's like, why am I so pissed off right now? And so I think, I'm sure you've seen this also, and this idea of prioritizing yourself. And the way that I've described it is that you should love yourself enough that you're okay disappointing other people. And that for me was huge. Recognizing that, they might be disappointed right now in my decision, in my request, but they'll respect me for that. I remember deeper level. I remember reading some David Data shit years ago where he talked about something like that. I was like, wait, what? Like, she'll be disappointed in me, but she'll respect me for disappointing her? That felt like mysticism. That felt like hieroglyphics. Like, I need to sit. I literally put the book down and sat there on the couch. Like, let me think about this. Right? But that's it. And so I recognize also if I'm loving myself enough that I'm okay disappointing other people. That's powerful. And then I started recognizing that if I say no to more things, then people will trust me more when I say yes to things, right? And I started honoring my truth and honoring myself. And now I'm just giving a TED talk about nice guy syndrome. But that's what I have to say about that, Mark.
Yeah. Yeah, when I love that story. I'm going to share it with our listeners. The example that David did, I use it with my clients a lot. It's like the soldier going to war, right? And like the wife is like, "Don't go, it's dangerous. Like I need you here. You got to stay home with the kids and the family, right?" And like the nice guy is like, "Yeah, sure," right? Like cancels the sign up, stays at home, right? And like the wife loses respect for him because like in that moment you have to be like, "Nah, I got to go to war." Right? Like, I know it sucks and it's going to suck for me. It's going to suck for you. It's going to suck for everybody. But like, I have this mission that I need to pursue. And, we'll communicate about it. I'll stay in touch. Like, I'm not cutting you off, but like, I got to do my thing. And I think that, as men, we always relate to like war metaphors and action hero shit. Right. And it's right there. Right. If you stay home, maybe you're doing the right thing. You think you're doing the right thing, but your wife is never looking at you the same way again.
Yeah, because you're like, hey, babe, let me grab the apron and help you make blueberry muffins. And you're like, I don't want to make muffins right now. And you're thinking about war and you're not even present. And then she says she can't feel you. And you're like, no, everything's fine. And you're a nice guy, so you don't want to speak your truth because then she'll be disappointed of you. But you don't really love yourself enough to speak your truth. And then in 3 years, you're divorced and you go talk to Mark, therapist. You're like, Mark, I don't know where I went wrong. I made blueberry muffins with my wife every week. So a different version of this in my own life, I'm recognizing like the war metaphor, but here's like perhaps a more practical, simple version. So we had a baby. I took time off from work to be with the baby and to like be present with my partner and my family. And I loved that. And I think that it's necessary. And I think it's vital and sacred. And the idea of 2 weeks off in America, for me personally, is ridiculous. I think you need like at least a month, at least 2 months, honestly, to like create the bond and be there. So that, soapbox aside, after, it changes, 4, 6, 8 weeks, I forget how long, I started feeling this little itch of like, we're good now. Like this family system, it feels sturdy enough. And my body was feeling like I needed to do something else. Like I needed to create. I needed to work. I needed to put something out in the world. And we ended up having several conversations, as you'd expect, around what's going to happen with the baby, what's going to happen with me and my time, what's going to happen with her and her time. How do we divide the responsibility? What's needed? And at some point, it got to the stage where I had to get a little more forceful. It was like, look, like I need X amount of time per day, per week to like go and do A, B, C, and D. Like I need it. Like this is a non-negotiable. Like I need that. And I could tell that there was some disappointment because it wasn't ideal for her. And at the same time, I could tell that she respected me for that because she gets it and has done the work. And that's our kind of partnership. And it was that exact idea of, look, I know that you want me to take 6 months off to like just be present and do all the things. And part of me wants that too. And there's part of me that wants to say yes to that because I don't want to upset you and I can see how it would make your life easier. But there's a more mature, more powerful part of me that has played this game before at a different carnival and remembers the outcomes and is like, nope, bro, we're not doing that again. We're going to love ourselves enough that we honor ourselves and we're going to be okay disappointing other people, even when it's the mother of our child after that baby was born just a couple months ago. It was like, this like new level of that just felt so uncomfortable in my whole body. And so it was stepwise. We didn't just jump to me being away 50 hours a week, but it like gradually was like, hey, I got my draft letter, might be going off to war. Like, hey, I bought my battle fatigues, like gonna be going off to war next week. Like gonna go to the shooting range to practice for 2 hours. Cause remember, I gotta go off to war soon. Like I'm feeling the itch. Right. So I don't know, maybe that example is helpful for people.
For sure. Yeah. And I guess, I ask you, but I imagine it's the case, is like if you're able to fill up your cup, you can be more present for your wife and your kid when you are there instead of like being the blueberry muffin boy, right? Where you're just like pissed the whole time and living in regret of like, oh, what if I, could have been a war hero or whatever the metaphor is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we had some conflict too, where she's like, how are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm fine. Yeah, it's fine. It's all good. It
Are you
changes.
sure?
And my partner is so annoying because she is like a heart antenna. So she knows when something's not fine in me before I know it's not fine in me occasionally, which is the best and the worst. It's that like fuck you, love you sort of combo. We're like, yeah. So she got it. And
It
and
changes.
it was tough.
It
It's tough.
changes.
Like, all this stuff is tough, right? Like sobriety's tough. Therapy's tough. Growth is tough. Honesty is tough. It can be. But that's also just one story, right? And so you can rewrite that story of, oh, it's tough, but like it's expansive. It feels good. I like feeling proud of myself. It feels good to stand up for myself. Like that feels good. Feels good to like have the respect of my partner. Feels good to like be a man that I'm teaching my daughter to look up to. Like this is like what a good man is in the way that I define it. Like I want to live that. I don't want to be the grumpy guy in the apron making the muffins when I don't want to be there. But I got to go off and like do my work and do my thing. And then when I come home, guess what? I'm fucking home. Like I am present. Like I hang my work outside. I hang my troubles on the trouble tree. Like I'm here. Like you want to play for an hour? Like drool on me. Give me the baby. Like, hey, let me help with the cooking. Like I'm fucking here. And to your point, she can feel that and she knows that. And that makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge, right? Like it's about the quality and like you said, passing that on to your daughter, especially that she knows that her dad is present. I want to ask you, and maybe I'm probably still in flux, but like, what is the man you want to be for your daughter? Like, who is that guy that you want to model? What is your version of kind of modern masculinity?
It changes, right? It's hard to define, but so one thing that my partner and I did was we had a conversation and we said, what are the 3 values that you value most, that you prioritize, that you want to have in this family, like that we want to teach her, right? And so that's a helpful exercise. But for me, I feel like especially having a daughter, there's something about seeing a baby girl. And, my partner and I have talked about like, oh, you're going to have a boyfriend one day. And, oh, you're going to get married one day. Like, oh, somebody's going to kiss you one day. And like, oh, you're going to have boobs one day. And it's like, wait, you're going to be a woman one day. Like, oh, okay, hang on. And like, I'm the first man that you will ever love. And I'm imprinting on you, like we call her Slurp Slurp sometimes, like Slurp Slurp's away because she's just this little sponge at that age, right? And they don't miss anything, man. They're watching like a little hawk. And it's like, okay, I need to show up. And so for me, the simple answer would be, I want to create safety for her. Like I believe that good men create safety, full stop, in every area. Physical safety, emotional safety, spiritual safety. And so that, especially for a newborn child, like, is the world safe? Am I okay? Like, yeah, you're good. You're here. I also want to prioritize fun and aliveness and awe. So I'm like, look at that. That thing's got hair growing all over its body. That's a dog. Oh my God. Look at that dog. Look at that. That's a tree. Holy shit. Those are clouds, right? And so seeing the world through this miraculous lens is just a way that I try to live and I feel like is beneficial. And then I guess the third aspect of that, it's related to safety, I guess, is just radical acceptance and presence is what I'm attempting to practice more and more. And so when she's screaming and pooping on me and I'm tired and hungry, it's like, okay, it changes. Here I am. No cravings, no aversion. Just be here now. Like, you're like, perhaps another way to say that is like all of her is welcome here. Like, I got this. Like, you can scream your face off. Like, I will never not love you. I will never not be able to handle whatever you are going through right now. Like, I'm good. Like, bring it. Bring all of it. You know, so sometimes she's crying and I'm like, yeah, tell me more. Like, yeah, let it out. Let's go. Right. And so this idea of just trying to be this safe container for her to express and feel and be whoever it is that she needs to be in any particular moment, always. And man, is that a challenge. It's tough, but it's aspirational, and I think it's vital.
Yeah, you only got to do it about 60% of the time, right? I mean, that's what the studies show. Like, secure base, you only got to do about 60%. You got to get a solid D, and like, your kid's going to be totally fine. I mean, it warms my heart hearing that, because I think a lot of people, and I think especially a lot of women, need that from men, right? That safety and that, like you said, like, bring it. I'm not afraid of your emotions, right? Like, I can handle it. And I'm not going to shut them down. I'm not going to minimize them. I'm going to just like absorb them, contain them, and like then we're going to move forward. Like, I think that is so critical in the polarity between masculine and feminine energy. To go back to kind of David Data's work, you know.
Yeah, and you're just making me realize, like, I think there's a significant crisis. There's an epidemic. I remember an epidemic. There's a lack of good men out there. There are like men. I think all men are potentially, giant asterisk. All men are potentially good men, but they're perhaps not expressing themselves or showing up as good men, right? And this has been made apparent to me in so many random ways, in so many unexpected moments, right? So, for example, I take people on this big walk in Spain every summer. I take 8 people on the Camino de Santiago, and it's 200 kilometers, and it's 10 days, and it's intense, and blah, blah, blah. It's incredible. We go to cathedrals. We go to waterfalls. We go to rural Spain, forests, all of it. And the first 2 times I did that, it was all women that signed up. And each time, several of those participants, when we were reflecting on the trip, said, you know, the most powerful part of this whole experience, not the views, not the vistas, not the like profound epiphanies that I've had. It was that I was around good men. I remember I didn't realize how much I needed that. I didn't realize how much healing I could get from just being around good men. And I was like, what? So the first trip that happened, I was like, what? Okay, maybe that's an anomaly. It happened again the next year. And it was like, hang on. Like, what is happening here? I just have to show up and bring a good friend who's a good man to support and hold space. So I think the work that you're doing is vital. I think anybody listening to this, I remember like trying to be a better man, right on. Good for you. Thank you. And the other aspect of all of this is raising a daughter now and having a 4-month-old little girl who's perfect and this little treasure, the apple of my eye, and recognizing that she's going to grow up and go out into the world, right? And we all know the stories. We all know the statistics. We all know what's happening out there. It's like, hey, guys, I remember, sort your shit out. Right? I remember, because it's going to be my daughter one day. And every woman out there, I remember, has a dad, right? It's like, I remember, come on. I remember, let's sort it out.
Yeah. Amen to that, brother. I think that's well said. Yeah. I mean, I think there's like, yeah, there's a lot of boys that haven't grown up. And I think what you're calling to is, yeah, growing up to be a good man and growing up in every dimension, right? Not just physically, financially, which I think is where it stops and ends for a lot of educators, but like you said, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, being able to create safety and be connected to the world. I think that's a wonderful call to action.
It changes. Yeah. Thank you. And I've noted that too, of it changes traditionally, or I suppose in our culture right now, a good man means like that you could bench 225 and that you have 6 figures. Rich. You're jacked and rich. And it's like, cool. Like, you're a strong man. Amazing. Get on that stage that I just got off of in front of 200 people and tell me about the worst day of your life. I remember, get on that stage in front of 200 strangers and tell me about a time that you got your heart broken. You know, let me feel you. Tell me about what scares you. Tell me something you're ashamed of. You're like, oh, it's a different kind of strength, right? And so I believe that strong hearts are kind hearts, right? Kind hearts are strong hearts. Compassionate hearts are strong hearts.
I remember
Hearts, strong hearts. It's not easy to do those things. To be forgiving, that takes strength. To be present takes strength. And so I'm sort of on this quest to redefine what it means to be compassionate and understanding and loving and empathetic. I think for a long time, all of those words and those ideas have had horrible PR teams. They've had terrible agents representing them. And they have been shoved into this box of, oh, to be compassionate means red hearts around unicorns and I love you smooches and da 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 da. And it's this little feminine thing that like is dainty and fragile. It's like, no, it's fucking strong and it's fierce and it's hard and it's like very, very important. So let's try to redefine that, right? Get a better marketing team.
I remember
get some new ideas around because, yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like I'm ranting about this, but it is something that I really believe in. And I just view kindness and compassion as this kind of root solution to so many root problems that are out there, whether that's disconnection or polarization or any number of things, violence, addiction, etc. If we can cultivate more kindness and compassion and empathy and understanding with each other and with ourselves, the world will be better off for it. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I agree, right? It's like, if we can lean in instead of pushing away, then the world would be a much better place. Well, Jeremy, I've really enjoyed this conversation. We're nearing the end of our show. Where can people learn more about you online if they like what they're hearing and they want to follow and just, learn more?
Yeah. So Long Distance Love Bombs is the name of my business. You can find me longdistancelovebombs.com or on Instagram or Substack. And I do coaching. I do adventures. I'm taking people camping in Canada in the summer. So reach out anytime. Or if you just have a question, like I'm here to help. I'm here to support. Find me, get in touch.
Fantastic.
I have a book. I wrote a book too.
Oh yeah, check that out.
Anyway, yeah, it's I like all the personal development starter pack. Like I got a nose ring. I'm vegetarian. I wrote a book. I have a podcast. Like you'll figure it out. You'll find me.
Yeah, and all that stuff will be in our show notes. We've had some listeners ask, where are the show notes? I'll just say they are the description of the podcast. They are in whatever you're listening on right now. If you just click description or more or whatever it says on your app, all that stuff will be there. So I'll have links to all of Dr. Goldberg's stuff. So Jeremy, thank you again for joining us.
You're very welcome, brother. Thanks for being here.
And listeners, thank you again for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, do all the social stuff, like, share, subscribe, send to someone that needs to hear about kindness and compassion. Maybe send it to a new father. Maybe send it to somebody who is struggling in their relationship and needs some guidance from Jeremy. There's a lot of really good nuggets in here. So send it, share it, like it, do all the stuff. Your support really matters to keep the show alive. And to really get the message out there and break down the stigma of mental health for men. So thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. And don't forget to visit menstherapy.online to learn more about the work that we are doing to support and inspire men. Until next time, keep moving forward.